now that I know what I know.
So introduce yourself so that it'll go on the thing.
Okay, ready?
You ready, Chris?
Okay.
I already started.
All right, hi everyone. I'm Susanna Burns. I'm a consulting hypnotist and guided imagery master. And tonight I'm going to be talking about communication strategies for effective relationships. And to start, I'm going to just draw a circle and explain the theory of mind, and then I'll have some examples. If you guys have questions, you can wait till the end. I'm sure you're going to have lots of examples about, oh, okay, now I get it kind of deal. So it is called relationship strategies, but it's relationships that are good for mothers and children, husbands and wives, workers, co-workers, bosses. It's just something, once you understand this, it really helps you kind of have the upper hand when you're talking to people, because now you know not just where you're coming from, but you can kind of understand where they're coming from. And when you want to influence somebody, you kind of know how to talk to them in a way that is going to directly affect them. And as a hypnotist, I need to know how to do that, so I'm going to teach you guys. Okay? So to start, I'm going to do what we call the theory of mind, and that's kind of your head. So this is actually, we call it theory of mind. And the theory of mind is basically explaining the way the subconscious holds information and how we begin to form our behavioral patterns and the way we receive information. So when we're born, we all have primitive mind. And primitive mind houses fight, flight, and freeze. And in the days of primitive man, those were the ways that men would defend themselves from any sort of attacker. So this was fight, let's say. And this is flight. And this is freeze. But now, because our attackers are not physically out there like animals that are waiting for us outside of our caves, there's nothing like that. Now we have anxiety. And we have flight, which is, this is fight, so this becomes, I'm not understanding my own writing here. So fight becomes anxiety, flight becomes depression, and freeze becomes zoning out. So now, instead of having a physical fight, we have these mental fights where the thoughts are attacking us. And the flight, instead of running from the problems, we go into a depression where we just don't engage with the world and we don't associate with it. It's not a clinical depression, it's just the depression of the time being, and then we come back after a week or two. And freeze is zoning out, where we just like, that's it, I'm done. And now I'm over here in my mind. I'm here physically, but in my mind I'm thinking of other things. So primitive mind is where we go when we reach high levels of stress. So from the ages of 0 to 8, children are taking in all sorts of experiences. And good and bad associations happen. And these we come to call knowns. And these knowns become a frame of reference of the experiences that children have. So these experiences are what Freudian would refer to as the pain-pleasure principle, and not pleasurable as in, oh baby, it feels good, but pleasure as in, it doesn't cause me pain, it doesn't cause me any suffering. So whenever a child is experiencing something, sometimes they're told, I do this because I love you. I spanked you, I love you. You know, I did this, I love you. So the kid is getting messages, good and bad. They don't know how to discern what's good, what's wrong. They're just taking all of this stuff in. So, for instance, a lot of things, celebrations, birthday cakes. So that becomes a constant repetition, and kids love to have that stuff. And then there's things like, I'll discuss it more, but some children learn love is unconditional, and some children learn love is deserved. Love comes with condition. So all of those things come put into the mind, and when children become around the age of 8 or 9 years old, they start to develop what is called or considered the critical mind. And that's when they stop believing everything that they're told, and they start to have their own critical assessments and analysis of things. So right around that time, they begin to form what I call drawl. And this is their decision-making skills, reasoning, analytical skills, willpower, and logic. So anytime we as adults and as children growing up try to make any sort of decisions, we use all of these or some of these, and we try to make our decisions to change our behavior. Now, this whole part of the subconscious mind makes up 88%. So kind of like we see the iceberg, we only see the tip of the iceberg. That's about 10 to 12% of what's going on the surface. This top part is the 12% conscious mind. So we every day are working with 12% of our mind. 88% of our mind, of what we're doing, is coming from our subconscious. So all of these experiences that we had that were repeated over our childhood and then, into adulthood, all of those things are strengthened. And it's not that we don't change again after the age of 9, but it becomes a little bit harder to change a child's mind, an adolescent's mind, an adult's mind. So during the day, all of these things that are in the subconscious mind are affecting us, as well as things of our environment, our physical body, life, more of the environment in regards to the activities, and family. So all of these things are constantly taking from our 12%. And so what happens here is that when we want to make any sort of change, any sort of thing in our life, we're trying to use these things, but we also have these things that are influencing us, life, the physical, this, and the subconscious mind also comes back. Memories, and one of the things that why I try to keep a fragrance-free environment is because fragrance triggers memory big time. So you can, when I worked in hotels, I would always make sure that there was no fragrance in the rooms, because you walk into a hotel and it smells like your ex-boyfriend, your trip is ruined. You know, it's like you cannot do that to somebody, and you just can't. So fragrances, things like that, it's like it will affect your mood, and you won't even know it sometimes. You know, it's like, now I'm pissed, and you don't even know why, and it's because that fragrance, you know, reminded you subconsciously of some deep hidden memory that you don't even carry consciously, but the subconscious does. So all of these things, when we're trying to do anything in hypnosis, when we're trying to help a client out, what we do is we say deep sleep so that we can help the critical mind relax, and we can help the client make changes. Because what happens is, when they try to make a decision consciously, they're using 12% of their mind, which after all of this is probably not so much 12%, and they're trying to change 88% of their self, of their way of being. So what we do is we help them by creating that state of physical relaxation to go in and help them make their changes. So when they do it on their own without hypnosis, what happens is the critical mind is not going to allow these changes. It's like the receptionist of the mind. And so when somebody says, I want to have a better diet, that's a big one. So they go in and they say, I want to have a better diet, and the critical mind says, oh yeah, that sounds good. I read it on a magazine, that looks good. Diet, okay, we're going to diet. And the critical mind says, well, we're going to diet, and the subconscious mind says, I know you want to diet, but we like cake. And remember, mom's food equals love. And remember that time that we went on that holiday and we had such a lovely time and the food was so good. And so you have all of these positive associations with food that even though it's brought you to the point where you need a better diet, you still want to hold on to this because this is what's familiar. And you don't know what's on the outside over here because you've not ventured out of what's familiar. Most people stay within their frame of what's familiar. So in hypnosis, what we do is we create the state of sleep, and we say deep sleep. So the physical body becomes totally relaxed and the conscious mind is totally paying attention, but in a way that it's not going to resist what you've said you want to change. So that's when we go into it and we start saying, okay, well, you have your diet, it's time to change, and we word it in a way that is going to help each individual client. So some people go to these big groups, and it's 100 people in the room and one hypnotist, and the hypnotist says, you don't want to eat that anymore, and snaps their fingers, and half of the room says, I don't want to eat that anymore. And the other half of the room says, this guy's crazy. I still want to eat. I'm going to go eat some more right now because you're not going to tell me what to do. And so this is where the difference comes in for the E and the P and the emo and the Phys, which is what I'm going to explain now. So this basically is something that we all pretty much work with, the theory of mind. And it helps people understand what's going on and why there's so much resistance to change. Even when people come in for hypnosis, there's still some resistance to change because there's something in here that's holding on. So even though they say, yeah, I really want to lose the weight, sometimes that weight is a protection for some sort of trauma that they had in their life that they don't want to accept, hurt them. So there's other reasons why people have challenges with that. One thing that's happening a lot right now is critical mind is being weakened big time by social media, by the environment, by what's going on. And so children and adolescents don't necessarily have that ability anymore as strong as they might have a generation or so ago. And so they're going into primitive mind state more often. They become more hypersuggestible, and what happens is what's going on in the environment becomes stronger and stronger. So the environmental things that are affecting them, there's no critical mind to tell them, hey, stop, this is not a good thing, this can change. And there's more primitive mind, there's more hypersuggestibility, there's more overload in society now because there's way more stuff that's taken away from our 12%. So people end up coming here more often into primitive mind. Okay, so what I'm going to teach you tonight, though, is more along the lines of the emo and the Phys. Did you get the handout?
I did not.
So we're going to talk about the E and the P because that's the part that helps in the relationships, and this is the funny part because I get to watch it. I mean, just because I know how to communicate effectively doesn't mean like I'm at peace all the time. I am at peace, but how can I say, I know what's going on, basically. It's like, oh, you're fizzing out is the term that we use for this, basically, and you don't fall into the cycles of behavior that you would have otherwise fallen into, or that I would have otherwise fallen into, because I know what I know now. So when a client comes in, we have a series of questions, and we ask, and we find out what their percentage is on a scale of 0 to 100, where they fall in the range of the E and the P, the emotional and the physical. And nobody is 100% anything. If you are more towards the 60-40, that's good because that gives you the ability to be more aware of the other person's perspective versus somebody who's a 70% emotional will have no idea how to even begin to understand a physical, and somebody who's a 70% physical will not be able to understand an emotional. So an emotional person, they are the kind of person that speaks literally, and the physical speaks inferentially. So when you're talking to a Phys and you ask them, how was your weekend? They're going to give you the whole detail of how the weekend went down, what car they took, where they parked, where they ate, here's this, here's that. I mean, they will give you every detail. And the emo's just gonna tell you, fine, it's just real quick, to the point, it was good. No matter what, they'll pretty much always just say, fine. Primary concerns, this is where we can really begin to tell when people are one or the other. The primary concern for an emotional is financial security. Second is hobbies. Third is relationships and family. And fourth is sex and lovers. For the physical, primary concern is relationship and sex, physical affection. Second is family and children. Third is friends and hobbies. And fourth is career and security. So when you're in a relationship with somebody and that whole opposites attract thing, this is where it can become a challenge if you don't understand that the other person has the same priority, just not in the same order. And also, a lot of times emos think, well, I do love my family, so financial security isn't necessarily right, but it is because sometimes we go to work, and I say we because I'm emo, we'll go to work 60, 70 hours a week to provide for our family. Yes, I love my family, but this is how I show my love. Whereas the physical, it's being there, it's I want to be there, and to heck with my career, you know, it's more like I want to be there more than the emo does. So when there's a relationship and you can understand that this is how my partner is loving the family by going to work 60 hours a week instead of getting mad you're not home, it helps to understand that. Another big thing is the way that things are interpreted between the emo and the Phys. The emo, a thought is a thought. So whenever we say something to an emo, they think about it and they make an image about it in their mind. Then it becomes an emotional feeling and then a physical response. So after they've sat with their feelings and they've thought about it, they will do something about it physically, and that's where you can see the response. With the physical, the thought becomes an image, and then it becomes a physical feeling, and then an emotional response. So this is where they vary, because the physical will be more on the emotional expression. For an emotional, love is conditional. So when they're growing up, love, basically, the way they give, the way they love is, it's a condition, like clean your room. I mean, I'm an emo mom, and I'll admit it, and it's a lot of times emo moms come in, and number one thing is guilt. Like the feeling moms get the most is the emo guilt, because we're focused on our career and we don't feel that natural, normal mom thing that, you know, we're told we're supposed to have. And it ends up being like this, like, okay, I will spend time with you, but you gotta clean your room, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. So the child is growing up learning love is conditional. And then there's moms that, I love you, come here, I don't care if your room's a mess and you roll all over the walls, I love you. I'm not that mom. But there are moms out there, physical moms. Then the emotionals. Emotionals build a subconscious system to protect the safety of their physical existence. And the physicals want to protect their emotions, because to them, that's the most important thing, is expression of emotions. The next part is the way of being. So, emo and Phys. Emos, a lot of times they tend to, in school they would say more introvert, extrovert, but it's not necessarily an introvert, extrovert thing. This goes a little bit further than that. Emos tend to speak direct, and they hear inferentially, and a Phys will speak inferentially, and they hear directly. So if you know that you have an emo teenager, they're the ones that this helps the most, because one day you'll have your teenage daughter come downstairs and you say, you look pretty today. What, did I look bad yesterday? What are you saying? You know, so it's like, I didn't say anything. I just said something nice, but now you took it and made it into this. Same thing with spouses. You know, it's like, oh, you look good in that. What are you saying? I looked fat yesterday. So if you know who's who, then you know how to speak to them. The Phys will speak inferentially in a roundabout way, tell you all the details about everything, but they hear directly. So when you want to get an emo to listen to you, you speak indirectly, and a Phys, you speak to them directly. That's right there, the key line right there. Perfect example, last night my husband put a bunch of plastic pellet bags next to the stove, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's gonna melt. So instead of telling him, move the bags, I said, because I'm emo, I said, don't you think it would be a good idea if, you know, how did I say? I said, I think those bags will melt next to the stove. So he got up and moved them. I didn't tell him, get up and move it. I said, I think that will melt. I indirectly told him. That's how emos are when it comes to speaking. And he's more Phys, so, but he also knows me, so. So, you know, he knew to get up and move the bags. A Phys, you've got to tell them things directly. And children up until the age of 9 are Phys, so you have to be direct with kids. You can't tell them things in a roundabout way. If you want a Phys to do something, you got to say, hey, can you get up and close the door? Whereas if I'm in a room with emos, I'd say, oh, it's so cold in here. The biggest emo's gonna get up and close the door. I didn't tell them to close the door, but they took it like, oh, she wants me to close the door. That's how they take in information. Emos tend to be tight in the body. When they sit, they're more prim, proper, and upright, don't adjust. And the Phys are freer in body movement. So sometimes you'll see somebody, and they'll just put their leg up in a chair and sit in what would be an improper way to an emo. And that's just more how the Phys are. Emos feel emotional pain mentally. We think about how it sucks. We don't act on it. We don't feel it physically. We think about it. Phys feels emotional pain physically. So once their emotional pain gets to a point where they start to realize like this relationship is over, there's heartbreak, they will actually physically begin to feel tightness in the chest. They will begin to feel disconnect in the body. They feel strange. They feel off because they are physically manifesting emotional pain. Emos tend to have social anxiety, and I put needs time to cancel because we're not good at last minute things. We need time to cancel in our mind and say, I'm going to tell them this. No, I used that excuse last time. Oh, hold on, wait, I got something else. And so they need time in their mind to think about how they're going to go. Do they want to go? And when they get there, they're usually the wallflowers. Unless they know the ENP and they partner up with a Phys, because the Phys will be the one that loves to socialize. So if an emo is with a Phys, then the Phys is going to be the one who's going to go around the room and introduce the spouse, and meet my husband or wife, whoever the more emo one is. And the emo tends to be the one that's more reserved, more quiet. This plays out huge on dating, because when an emo wants to date, they put on a Phys outfit. And it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing, or kind of, sheep in wolf's clothing, because they want to come out and they want to be part of the hunt. And so the emo will Phys up, because remember, we're not 100% anything. So if you're 60% emo, then you're going to go and pull on that 40% Phys, and you're going to dress up and you're going to go out, and what you're going to find is another Phys. Or you're going to find another emo who's also pretending to be a Phys because they want attention, because something happened at home with the Phys. So now they're out trying to validate. And what happens is when the emo finds their partner, they get really comfortable and they say, okay, good, now I can go back into my own inner world in my mind. And then the Phys says, what happened? You've changed. You're not the same person anymore. You don't love me anymore. And so this whole thing starts to happen, and the Phys is coming forward. Because when the Phys feels rejected, they come forward. When the emo feels rejected, they go within. So what happens is they want to be alone. They want to come forward. So this emo now has to figure out, basically, either the cycles continue. Very often the cycles do continue until they figure something out, and not a lot of people notice the hypnotherapist for this kind of stuff. Subdued clothing, they tend to dress in layers, turtlenecks, scarves. I'm so emo, I got so many layers on, I got like 3 layers on right now. Flashy, revealing style. So when they go out, like I said, they're going to be more the wallflower. The Phys is going to be the one who's dressed for attention, going all around the room and just being really flashy. And the emo doesn't need compliments, doesn't give compliments. Like I said, they'll take it indirectly, and they're really suspicious when you do give them a compliment. It's like, what are you trying to say? I was just saying you look pretty. I didn't look good the rest of the time. So, and the Phys, they like to hear it, and they like to give it, and they give it in expectancy of getting one back. And so when they don't get it, then they start getting upset that their emo isn't giving them the attention. This one shows love. I'm here, aren't I? That's the big thing for the emo. I just show up. I'm here. I haven't left. And the Phys is constantly looking for that. Do you love me? Do you love me? As children, yes, big time, we need to tell them. Because the kids are always, do you love me? Does my mom love me? And when you're an emo mom, it's like, I made you breakfast. I'm here. Well, you got clothes. You got a roof. What more do you want? But the child and the Phys need that constant affirmation of love. Wants time alone. For the emo, they love to be alone. When it comes to sports, they're more into things that are by themselves, one-on-one type of things. The Phys, they want to be with you all the time. Let's go to the store together. Let's go here. Let's go there. Always want to be with you, even at home. And in sports, they tend to be more in the team sports, so they'll be more in like the volleyball, football, soccer, the one where it's the whole team that makes the win. For the emo, sex is sex. For Phys, sex is love. And this is the challenge, because when it comes time to have the act of sex, the emo will have what we call a cycle day, and that's really the only time that they're approachable. The rest of the time they're so in their head with whatever they're doing that if you try to come to an emo on a day that they're not physically present, the Phys begins to feel rejected. And they want that love, and they want that confirmation and that constant telling, I want you to show me you love me, and sex equals love. So if you're not having sex with me, then do you love me, kind of deal. And so understanding this is a great tool, because once you realize, you can tell when your partner, who the emo is, when they're more receptive, then you as the Phys know when to approach so that you don't get rejected and end up hurting yourself. So if you know you're the Phys and your partner is the emo, then you know, okay, well, I'm not going to talk to them Monday through Thursday, because I know Friday's the only day they're in the mood, maybe Thursday night, maybe Saturday morning. The rest of the time, no way, because they're focused on whatever their projects are. Because remember, their priorities, hobbies are up there, financial, those things are up there. So those things will make a difference in relationships and communicating. And the emo is more bottom line oriented, and the Phys will tell you all the details. So that again goes about them having just an indirect, inferred way of talking. So that's it for the ENP. I gave you guys a handout. I have yours. And it just tells you a little bit more about it and how they are. It's not, like I said, it's not necessarily just an introvert extrovert thing, but it's something that definitely helps you in understanding how to communicate with your family members. I mean, of course, some of these are not things that you would interact with your children with, but if there's an understanding of the emo and the Phys, I mean, I have pages of examples of the difference in behaviors, because even when it comes down to therapy and sessions, emos come in for anxiety, and these come in for relationship problems more so, and feeling the rejection and building self-confidence. They want more focus and more career and things like that. They also need help with feelings of guilt, whereas here they have the feelings of rejection to work through. So even in therapy, it makes a difference. Physes are wonderful in group therapy. Emos do not want group therapy. So like, I do hypnobirthing for emo moms, because I'm emo, and I do not want to sit in a group and share my stories. It's just, and I'm a leader of a group, sorry. But I have to Phys up to do this. Yeah. Like I have a month to think about it, so if I know I have to be physical, I prepare myself. Otherwise, I'm emo the rest of the time. Yeah. So, and I'm 54%. And so what happens when you're that percentage is whoever you're dating, or not necessarily just that percentage, but when you're on the line, there's a 10% where you can move more or less. So if I'm, as an emo, were to date a high Phys, I'm 54% Phys is what it is. I've been an emo so long, I forgot. So I'm 54% Phys. But my husband is in the 70s. Remember what I said about people in their 70s? They can't comprehend the emo. So I'm 54% Phys, he's 70% Phys. He out-Phyzed me. Mm-hmm. So now I'm working from my, 46%? I'm working from my second one. So it's not my strength, it's my subdominant. So my dominant one is Phys. So if I were to go out with my natural opposite, which would be an emo, then I would become the rejected Phys. I would be the one who's constantly seeking that affection and that attention. But because my partner is more Phys than I am, I'm the emo, and I'm happy as an emo. I'll tell you that right now. I'm happy as an emo. I'm more career focused. I'm more focused on that. I will gladly go to work 60 hours a week to support my family rather than try and play for 3 hours. So that's me, and because I know that this is how the EMP works, I don't feel guilty about that, because there's a lot of moms out there in groups that I hear that they feel so bad and so guilty because they don't feel that natural motherness coming out. They want to go to work, but instead of knowing like, hey, it's normal, you can feel that way, it's okay, they end up feeling all of these feelings of resentment and guilt, and it just takes away from their idea of what motherhood and life is going to be. So knowing this definitely helps in relationships, and it helps with your kids, with your teenagers, knowing that when you can tell your kids are growing up and they start finding their own personality in adolescence, excuse me, then you know which kid is which. Usually the children will be Phys up until about 8 years old. Once they start to realize how the dad is, how the secondary caregiver is, they start to become like the secondary caregiver, because they realize this person is my competition for my mother's affection and attention, so I need to become like them. So they become a natural opposite to their mother. So when they grow up, if they keep that natural opposite, their partner will be like their mom, not on purpose, but because we're going to naturally look for that opposite attract thing. So it's knowing what the strengths are so that you can complement each other. So if you know, like if two Phys get together, they're gonna be best friends. You know, if two emos get together, they're never gonna decide on what's for dinner. You know, so it's like there's things that you know, little things that will help to know, and you just like realize like, okay, two emos can be together, two Phys can be together. It's, or emo and a Phys, but it's just knowing where you are on the scale and giving your partner like the space to be who they need to be. Like we do at school, we call them Scooby snacks, you know, and they tell them, if you're an emo, sit down once a month and write down a whole bunch of little notes of appreciation and love for your Phys partner. So that way you can just like throw little notes at them. Leave me alone. Here's a little love letter. Here's this, you know, have flowers sent, you know, like, you know how you can, you know, schedule it for another day. Like you don't have to physically, mentally think about that person every day and all those little things to do for them, but you can prepare and do that. And the Phys would best serve the emo by leaving them alone. Leave them alone, let them do what they want to do, because they will come out. They come out of their minds, we do come out, and they will be there to be the partner. They are doing it in their way. It's just they don't do it the way the Phys does. And if you understand that, then it definitely does save a lot of grief. It saves a lot of grief. It definitely, I'm not going to say it brings 100% peace to the house, but at least you will know how to argue effectively.
Right.
Or how to keep peace, whichever it is, wherever you are and your dynamics at home. So that's the ENP and the theory of mind, a very brief explanation of it. And there's more on the handout. And that's it. Thank you.